So last week I had my first Spanish class in 2 years, I think, and I was like super excited about it. My class was on Friday, so Thursday night, Wednesday night, I was shaking with excitement and I just couldn't wait to start. And at some point, I found myself on Pinterest searching Penelope Cruz, Rosalia, and all those Spanish queens, for me at least, that have that embody the aesthetic of Hispanic culture and Spanish language as a part of it. And it got me thinking, like, everything I do in life, so much, okay, not everything, but so much I do in life is aesthetic driven, which is not necessarily a bad thing, actually. I cannot call it a bad or a good thing. It's just how I am and how I've always been. And yeah, I was just thinking about it and I thought, why not make a podcast out of it? Actually, I wanted to start a podcast for the longest time now. I don't know, 4 months maybe. But I'm this kind of person. Like, first, I need to live with the idea. I need to think everything through. First thing I always think about when I want to start a new project is branding. And I know it's kind of like reverse engineering of whatever. But yeah, I've come up with the branding first day I thought of making a podcast. Obviously, it hasn't made it to this point. I don't even know what kind of branding I want at this point. But I thought maybe it's a good reminder that first you should, if we're talking podcast, record something. And then you might think about the logo, about the cover, about your bio description, and how you're going to promote it. You have to have something to promote, right? Anyways, back to the topic. That sounded so natural. Should I brush my hair or should I be like... I mean, they're barely dry. And I'm looking like effortless. That's my aesthetic, right? Again, we're talking aesthetics. Anyways, so I started thinking, when was the first time I realized I'm doing something for aesthetic? And honestly, I just think it's in my blood. Maybe it's because I'm Slavic and the aesthetic is just in us. We love everything aesthetic. Or maybe it's just how I picked on my first hobbies in life historically. For example, when I was 5, my mom brought me to this like music school. And while she wanted, like, when I needed to pick an instrument, she was like, maybe piano. But then someone told her, like, violin is much better for my pitch, for my ear. And for the aesthetics, a girl playing violin is so cute and so demure. And I ended up playing violin for 10 years. That's a flex, I know. Anyways, I don't play anymore, so nothing to flex about. When I was in high school, it was peak of Chiara Ferragni's, if you don't know, an Italian influencer, super big. It was like her peak, I think, at least in my feed, let's say. So I started like watching what she's doing, like her lifestyle, what she stands by, blah, blah, blah. I was like, damn, Italian language, the aesthetic of Italian language, the aesthetic of Italy, and being an Italian. Let me learn Italian. So I bought some books. I was like 16, 17. It was like summer holiday. And I would spend 5 hours a day doing exercise, learning vocabulary, learning grammar, like just totally in my headspace and doing my Italian homework I assigned to myself. Then when I was in university, I had to pick my second language besides English. And I mean, I could actually pick Italian, but I was actually hardwired, despite that fling I had with Italian when I was 17, 16. I was hardwired to pick French because since I was a child, There was always French music playing around the house. My mom would always mention here and there like some French actors, French names. My best friend, who I call my sister, she would study in France and everything. And since I was a very young girl, I was just obsessed with stripes. Who wears stripes? French girls. French girl aesthetic. Les Parisiens. So, yeah, this is how I got into French. And I made it a part of my personality, like a part of my personal branding, the fact that I speak French and that I follow this French fashion, let's say. Red lips, everything, and yeah, then tennis. And I started before the challengers, just so you know. But then it happened eventually. And now Spanish, which I also tried to learn 2 years ago. But now I'm like, yeah, I'm a bit bored of the French aesthetic. Like, I was trying to choose which language to get back to. Because, I love learning languages. And I was like, okay, I have some free time now. Is something burning in the house? Guys, I'm scared. Am I burning? Because I'm so hot speaking Spanish. Anyways, yeah, I wanted to pick a language. And I thought that maybe I resonate more with the Spanish aesthetic. Hola, ¿qué tal? Anyways, so yeah, I am very aesthetic driven to the core. But now that I'm thinking about it, what is aesthetic even? How would I personally define it? I mean, obviously there are many definitions. But to me, I would say it's the vibe. It's the energy, but also the mentality. So since now I'm obsessed with Spanish, it's this Hispanic mentality. It's like having a really strong character, strong, to some maybe bad temper, short temper, where you're but at the same time you're very fiery, you're very red, if that makes sense to you, I don't know, and very bright, very vibrant. And I feel like this is what I want to embody right now. This is how I would want to be, how I would want other people to describe me. And so basically I'm using, in this case, a language, or the language, as a tool or as a leverage to bring it to the surface. Or to, kind of put on me those characteristics. But it's totally my perception of it. Of course, there will always be personal aspect to it, because there will always be a very soft, very quiet Spanish girl, and there will always be super loud, super fierce and vibrant Parisien, But what I am saying here is, for me, aesthetic is a way to try on different roles, to live different lives and be different, to be a different person, depending on what aesthetic I'm picking on. And if you know me well, I don't just like things. I get obsessed. And it's always just one thing on one, can be even persona. Anthony Bourdain, currently, cannot get over him. And it's just the only thing I talk about. I keep bringing that thing, that persona, up in conversations. I will shitpost about it. I will make you love that. I'm just so dedicated to the aesthetic I pick for the period of time. But there is another, not issue, but rather an angle to this topic. That is the difference between the aesthetic I'm currently trying on and my personal aesthetic, because as Daria Pavlova, I do have my own aesthetic. I have my own Daria core, Gen Z language. And what happens if the two aesthetics clash, for example, if they cannot coexist? I gotta tell you, I've experienced that far too many times. But my favorite and like I think most illustrative example of it is me trying to be nonchalant. I don't know who, like which character or whatever inspired it, but I feel like it's been a trend, like just like a societal trend. Like everyone is just trying to be nonchalant. What the fuck? But anyways, I'm not judging. I'm just saying we have some clash here. So I'm a very sensitive person. Not to the point where it's like really easy to upset me or to let me down. After all, I'm a Sagittarius moon, like there is no way. I will just love and move on. But I'm still a Cancer ascendant. I'm a Cancer rising. So I'm a softie. And I feel things really, really, really deeply. And this whole being nonchalant thing, like it's an antipod to what I am. But sometimes you gotta try new things. And you know, you have to adjust to the society and to the whole like vibe around you. And well, I actually think this era from 2021 to 2025, like early 2025 or like late 2024, was like super nonchalant, casual, blah 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 kind of period of time. I think I should study that like astrologically. I've been getting into astrology lately, by the way. So maybe next thing you know, I'm becoming an enigma. I feel I am already an enigma, but in a sense where I'm like, you know, like a fairy just flying around talking about stars and houses and constellations. But back to my topic. So yeah, and what I noticed when I tried to pick on that aesthetic that wasn't really mine, I found myself feeling like really lost and really like kind of having an identity crisis of like, what am I like? Who am I? And what the fuck am I doing here, you know? It took me some time to get back to who I am and to just admit I'm a bit insane. And that's my best part, I think. But yeah, this type of personality and aesthetic clash really send you like on this journey of like getting to know yourself. Like I think it's like kind of a canon event, has to happen to everyone if they really want to learn what they are. Like to learn what you are, first you need to learn what you are not. And I honestly feel like I think most of us actually do it, at least most of us girls do it. I feel like we use it as a litmus paper, stay with me, to just see what reacts, like what we react with, what we resonate with, and what we like don't resonate with. I think aesthetic is actually, in a sense, a great tool for self-discovery. But we don't live and we don't exist in isolation. Neither does our aesthetic. And sometimes we can be misread. And I think if that happens, that's the first indicator to how this mask we wear on for others doesn't really fit our face, like our real face, our personality. Let's say you meet someone new. You spend some time together, you start getting to know each other better, and after 3-4 months, you're having this like amazing, funny, and heartfelt conversation over like a glass of wine or like a little cocktail. And you can already call that person your friend, and suddenly they slip something like, I thought you were such a bitch when I first met you. And you're like, what do you mean? And, well, guys, for some of us, of course, it's just the way we present ourselves. For some of us, it's cultural. For some of us, it's like personal. Like we are closed, like you can be really closed off to people you don't know. For me, it's both cultural and personal. So I thought you were a bitch first, quite many times. But sometimes it might be, just as I said, an indicator to how the dress you put on doesn't really fit you. That's what I love the most about people and like communicating with people and meeting new people. We are all mirrors, and you can read that we're all mirrors in two ways. First, we mirror what we see and experience, or other people can be like a reality check to us on how we present ourselves to the world. And of course, I cannot forget to mention the role of media, social media in this. First and foremost, how we pick on our next personality, our next aesthetic from what we see online. Take my example with Chiara Ferragni when I was 17, or gosh, take your latest obsession with, I don't know, color brown. I also made color brown my whole personality, by the way. But that's another topic. And while I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, actually, it might have its consequences. Such as, for example, picking on the wrong aesthetic for yourself, picking on the wrong thing to follow and try to incorporate in your vibe, in your own personality, in your own life. And finally, it's the danger of following and trying to adopt a heavily curated aesthetic. This is a very popular topic lately, I feel like. So I'm not gonna go too deep in that, but just so maybe someone needs to hear that, because I sometimes need to hear it too. What you see online is not real. It's deeply curated, and I am not an influencer personally. I'm just trying to be one. But even with my social media, I curate a lot. Even if it's a dump, like a photo dump, I might not be too picky about what I post. But still, I'm trying to have, like, to give this image, like, I'm fun, I'm relaxed, and I'm, like, super cool. And also, I speak Spanish. So, don't fall into that. Even if it's, like, not an influencer and just a girl you met once at a party, and now just follow. But, also, at the same time, social media is such a great way to live the aesthetic you've picked. You know, like if you're using it for yourself, this is your canvas you can use to bring the aesthetic to life. You know, let's say, again, my example, I'm learning Spanish. Well, now all my captions will be in Spanish, and I won't write a single one of them. I will just go on ChatGPT. Hey, help me caption this picture in Spanish. I mean, we're best friends with my ChatGPT. How else am I supposed to do that, you know? anytime I put a song on my story, well, you're lucky if it's not in Spanish and not by some no-name Spanish artist with 2,000 monthly listeners on Spotify. I might be annoying and really difficult to tolerate. But do I care? No, I'm enjoying my aesthetic and you can have it. Now I want to move on to ups and downs of doing, if not everything, then like 90% of what you're doing for aesthetics. Honestly, I feel like it's the same as doing it for the plot, kind of. So one most obvious benefit I see of that is just like it brings you to all these unexpected places you would never think you would find yourself in, but you are there and it's fucking nice. For example, I followed this tennis aesthetic 1.5 years ago, and while now, I mean, I still have my racket, but do I play? No. But at the same time, now I kind of have a hobby, if not playing the sport, but at least following it. And like, you know, it's nice to follow something, especially since it's like such a cute and fun and high-end sport. Second, I think it makes you more intentional, like with your choices. And I think that has this like grounding effect. Like you actually take accountability, like you are able to take accountability for whatever you're doing. And if you want to be an adult person, maybe that's a skill you should learn. I'm still learning, but I'm getting better at it every day. And my favorite thing, it gives you this storyteller's power. What I mean by that is that you basically become the main character in your own life. And maybe you don't need an aesthetic to feel that. But still, like, even if you already feel like the main character, it intensifies the feeling. It's like MSG for your main character syndrome. And it's not necessarily bad, unless you don't interfere with other person's main character energy. But there is one really disturbing thing, at least for me, might be fine with you, about just being so aesthetic driven, is like sometimes you are not really present. You're just like, I'm telling you, like, I get obsessed with something and like I'm just in my head space about this specific thing, and it's not necessarily good. You stop noticing other things, and those things could be your next aesthetic and you could just like enjoy another lifetime. But also I think it might be a form of escapism, but at the same time, on the bright side, it might be someone's coping mechanism. For example, with me, again, let's talk about Spanish since I'm obsessed. Like, I'm a softie. But now that I'm taking in all this, like, Hispanic aesthetic and picking on this, like, cultural, like, not toughness, but I think you get me. I'm covering the softness that I have with this layer of, this, like, cultural layer, let's say, like, aesthetic layer. And suddenly I'm not that soft again. And I can speak up and I can do many things if you piss me off. But anyways, I'm not trying to portray Spanish speaking people as like, you know, super angry and super ready to fight at all times. Of course not. We all know how beautiful that culture is, but I'm just taking one aspect of that culture, okay? Don't come after me for that. Another risk here is when being aesthetic driven, as I put it becomes being performative, which is, again, not necessarily a bad thing. Can also be a coping mechanism, can come from all sorts of traumas and insecurities, which we don't judge, by the way, but being performative exhausts the hell out of you, because it's a mental labor that requires 24-hour consistent effort. By being performative, you risk surrounding yourself with people who are not really good for you. Doesn't mean they're bad, they're just not good for you. But obviously there is always two sides of the same coin, and if used with caution, I'm still pro being aesthetic driven, and I think it's a great tool, at least for me, and at least if you're leveraging it. Again, with caution. Also, I just thought that aesthetic is also some form of alchemy. I mentioned how I'm trying to fix, quote unquote, my softness, which I might not like in certain occasions. And what I thought is, sometimes we might use aesthetic as a tool to help us turn something we don't really like about ourselves into something we love about ourselves. So if I were to structure my personal opinion on aesthetics based on everything I mentioned here, so like this is sort of TLDR, I would say there are 3 ways you can see aesthetic. So first is a way to live different lifestyles through culture, through language, through color palette, through music, through rituals, you name it. Like, using those, you try on different identities without overcommitting. It's like a personality play. And it's also a way to try on a version of yourself that wouldn't have come out on its own otherwise. Second is aesthetic as a way to explore yourself, as self-exploration. You notice, you learn what you gravitate towards, what feels off, and you can actually track how your tastes change with time, which is a completely natural thing. And oftentimes it's a visual and tactile mirror of your inner life and how it comes in color, in textures, in tastes, whatever. And finally, aesthetics is some sort of self-repair kit, and using it you can address your insecurities directly. Let's say you feel chaotic inside, and then you pick on the clean girl aesthetic, let's say, and life finally has some structure. By the way, since we're talking clean girl, I think this is exactly why like this Hailey Bieber, Sophia Ricci type of stories are actually so common, because like when you're in this like party girl era, party girl age, like, I mean, it's not the easiest time for your inner peace, and after some time you just have to come to structure, to clean whites, beautiful beiges, and lip balms over MAC lipsticks in shade Diva. I personally had that one. Interesting times of my life. Or, for example, you can do vice versa, like you feel invisible, and then you try on I don't know, you become an emo or whatever. Or like me, try on something that's stereotypically loud and taking up a lot of space to make yourself feel more visible, at least. So yeah, this is my take on being aesthetic driven and like just in general on aesthetics. And this is also my first ever podcast episode, and I'm actually really happy with how it turned out. And it's actually so exciting to do this. Oh my god, I'm so happy. And I really hope I post it. And in case I did, I hope you like it. And that would be so great if you let me know that you liked it. And I would love to hear your thoughts on this too. So make sure to why did I become Australian for a sec? Make sure to let me know what you think in the comments, I guess. There is a comment section. So I feel important and cool and influencery. Or at least DM me and let's talk about it, because I think it's a topic that would be relevant for many of us. Yeah. And shout out to a friend who said I should start a podcast. That's really fun. Yeah, hope you liked it, because I did. Bye!